Snow fell gently outside the cafe windows, soft and silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Inside, the warm air smelled of roasted coffee and cinnamon rolls, but even that comfort couldn't hide the tension that filled the room. A woman stood near the door, her hands trembling around a paper cup, her face marked by deep burn scars that spoke of pain most people couldn't imagine. Her name was Mara Ellis, and she hadn't planned on being there that morning. She was only supposed to grab a coffee and leave before anyone noticed her. But fate has a way of cornering you when you least expect it. Across the room, a man in a black jacket looked up as she entered. Evan Callan, a single father known around town for his quiet kindness and for raising his little girl, Sophie, on his own since his wife's death 2 years earlier. The locals often said he'd lost his smile along with her. But at that moment, as he watched Mara step in from the cold, something in his eyes flickered. Recognition, maybe compassion, or something deeper, like a pull from a soul that recognized another soul's hurt. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of hearts that heal others, then please, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Bright Hearts. Your support helps us share more stories that remind the world there's still good left in it. Mara had once been a music teacher, known for her laughter and warmth. But 3 years ago, a house fire had stolen her parents, her home, and half her face. She had survived, barely, with scars that made strangers flinch and children stare. After months in the hospital and years of therapy, she moved to a new town hoping for peace. What she found instead were whispers, pity, and avoidance. Even the job interviews ended quickly once her scars were noticed. She'd stopped hoping to be seen as normal. That morning, she simply wanted a cup of coffee. No stares, no sympathy, just a brief escape. But as she stood in line, she could already feel eyes on her, the uneasy glances, the hushed voices. When she stepped aside to grab her cup, a small accident happened. She bumped into someone, spilling coffee slightly onto a coat. Mortified, she turned to apologize. That's when she saw him, evident that he wasn't angry. Instead, he gently took the cup from her hand and smiled softly. "It's all right," he said, his tone calm, steady. But she saw something else, empathy, not pity, in his eyes. Still, she stepped back quickly, murmuring a shaky sorry before heading toward the door. Her instinct was always to flee. Evan watched her go, something heavy in his chest. Sophie, his 8-year-old daughter sitting by the window, had seen the whole thing. "Dad?" she whispered. Why did everyone look at her like that? Evan didn't answer right away. He just stared at the woman's retreating figure, her coat dusted with snowflakes, and thought of the nights he'd seen his daughter cry, missing her mother. The same kind of loneliness, just in another shape. Then, as if driven by something beyond logic, he got up and called out, "Wait." Mara froze. She turned slowly, clutching her cup, her breath catching when she saw him approaching. The cafe had gone silent. Even the chatter seemed to fade into the background. He stopped a few feet away, his voice softer now. "Don't leave. Not this time." The words hung between them like a fragile bridge. She blinked, confused. "Do I know you?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "No, but maybe you should." For a moment, Mara didn't know what to do. People were watching. She could feel the sting of their judgment like cold needles against her skin. But when she saw Sophie smiling gently from her seat, something inside her softened. Against all her instincts, she stayed. Evan invited her to sit, offering to buy her a fresh coffee. Hesitant, she agreed, though her heart pounded wildly. It had been so long since anyone had treated her like a person and not a tragedy. As they sat down, Evan asked about her name, her story, what brought her to town. She hesitated, but his voice was patient, never pushing. Slowly, she told him, about the fire, the loss, the stairs, the loneliness. She expected him to look away halfway through. He didn't. He just listened, eyes steady and kind. When she finally looked up, tears blurred her vision. "People don't usually stay when I talk about it," she said. "I'm not most people." He replied simply that. Sophie leaned over and placed a small cookie in front of Mara. "Mom used to say cookies help sad hearts," she said shyly. Mara smiled for the first time in what felt like years, a real, unguarded smile. Days passed, and what began as a chance encounter grew into quiet companionship. Evan would see her at the cafe some mornings, and soon, they began to talk regularly. He discovered that Mara still played piano, though she hadn't in years, and that music was her way of remembering who she used to be. He encouraged her to play again, even offered to fix the old piano sitting and used in his house for Sophie's lessons. One evening, he convinced her to come by. The house was filled with warmth, photographs, laughter, the smell of cookies. For Mara, it felt like stepping into a dream she'd once had but forgotten. When she sat at the piano, her scarred fingers trembled, but the first notes that filled the air silenced every fear she had. Sophie clapped joyfully, and Evan, standing in the doorway, watched her with quiet awe. Yet, not everyone was kind. Rumors spread about the burned woman spending time with a single dad. Some parents whispered at Sophie's school. Even one of Evan's co-workers warned him gently that people talk. But Evan didn't care. He knew what it felt like to be judged, to have your life reduced to whispers. One day, Mara overheard two mothers at the cafe saying she was just using Evan for pity. The words cut deep. That night, she didn't answer his calls. Days turned into silence, and Evan grew worried. Finally, he drove to her small apartment, snow crunching under his boots as he knocked on her door. When she opened it, her eyes were swollen from crying. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "People are saying things. I don't want Sophie to get hurt because of me." Evan stepped closer. "Mara, listen to me. People will always talk. But Sophie and I, we see you. Not the scars. You." Her tears spilled over. "You don't know what it's like to have people stare at you like you're broken." He reached out then, taking her hand gently, the same hand that bore faint burns. "You're not broken," he said softly. "You survived, and that makes you stronger than anyone who's ever judged you." In that moment, something shifted. The wall she had built around herself began to crumble. She let him hold her hand, and for the first time since the fire, she didn't pull away. Weeks later, the small cafe that had once been the scene of her shame became a place of healing. With Evan and Sophie's encouragement, Mara agreed to play piano for a local charity event, a performance to raise funds for burn victims. The night of the event, the cafe was packed. The same people who once whispered now gathered in admiration. When she began to play, her music spoke more than words ever could. It told a story of pain, courage, and hope. As the last note faded, silence filled the room, followed by a wave of applause that made her heart swell. Evan stood beside her, his hand still wrapped around hers. "See," he whispered. "They see you now, the real you." And for the first time, she believed him. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Bright Hearts. And remember, kindness can change lives in ways you may never see. Before we end, we'd love to hear from you. Comment below with these words if you believe in the power of compassion. I stand with kindness. Because sometimes, all it takes to heal someone's scars, seen or unseen, is the courage to hold their hand and not let go.